Public service announcements, or PSAs, are videos broadcast on TVs and in cinemas by the government or non-profit organizations to raise awareness about an ongoing problem in the country or the world at large. Some of them, however, are extremely disturbing, and I'll go over them, starting with tame and moving up to outright horrifying. Now, PSAs were first produced in 1941 during World War II, when the American government used advertising campaigns to encourage their citizens to support the military.
These are your enemies! These are the people who are trying to take over our country!
Decades later, in 1986, one PSA covered a topic that still ruins the lives of thousands of adults today, and yet this video was specifically targeted towards kids, as it was being shown between cartoon broadcasts. The video opened on a city street at night, where a young man can be seen handing something to a group of teenagers, before he turned and looked directly into the camera. He addressed the audience, calling them little dude, and even encouraging the kids watching to send your mama and daddy out of the room. Then he introduced himself.
You know who I am. Snake. Dealing in weed, coke, crack, your choice.
Despite speaking to kids, he began talking about using illegal drugs. But this dealer, Snake, insisted that it was okay.
Take one hit and you'll do anything to cop more. Steal from your mama, lie, cheat on your homeboys.
He talked about how the drugs he was selling would make them do awful things. And as he mentioned this, someone passed by in front of the camera, momentarily blocking the view from Snake. And when he appeared again, his face looked different. He stood in the darkness, so the viewer couldn't see him clearly. Yet the shape of his head almost didn't look human anymore. It had odd angles and the size of his head started to grow. Then after he crossed behind a pillar, something appeared at the back of his head, like a thick rounded hood. He then went behind another pillar as he delivered his final lines, and this was when he finally revealed his actual identity and intentions.
Now, some folks will tell you that I'm dealing in poison, but hey, do I look like the kind of guy that would do that to a kid like you? Yes!
The image of Snake the dealer turning into an actual snake horrified children in the 80s, and even after growing up, many of them are still haunted by the horrific visuals. Under the comment section of the re-uploaded version of this video on YouTube, several of these traumatized adults can be seen expressing how deeply it affected them. I remember seeing the commercial as a kid. I had nightmares for weeks. And another commented, I even had nightmares of extended versions of this commercial. And this kind of effect was exactly what the producers of this ad were aiming for. The inspiration of this PSA began when a surge of crack cocaine hit the United States in the mid-1980s. It was a recreational drug that was cheaper, faster, and more addictive than anything that had come before. And seeing the increase in substance abuse, a group of advertisers formed a non-profit organization called the Partnership for a Drug-Free America in 1985. Their aim was to use the same tactics of advertising products to unsell drugs. And the first marketing campaign they proposed was targeted to a younger audience to reduce their chance of ever using drugs. And this was why the PSA campaign they called Snake directly spoke to the children watching. The kids he was selling to were used to seeing harmless cartoons on TV. During the schedule, the PSA was being aired, and this allowed him to shock them with his transformation into an actual snake. But his transformation wasn't what concerned others. In 2019, Marketplace.org, a public media website, released an article about the history of anti-drug PSAs. In this article, Charlton McWayne, an associate professor at New York University, commented on the ad's choice of hiring a black-skinned actor to play Snake, who, at the beginning of the video, was also selling to black teens. He said, I'm getting a message of fear, but what I'm seeing is an image of blackness, in subtle ways that give us a license to treat people like animals. And that's precisely what you saw throughout the crack war, looking at African Americans primarily as its target. And unfortunately, there was no evidence that these PSAs ever worked. In a 2016 federal evaluation by the Barnstable County Regional Substance Abuse Council, researchers found the scare tactics are largely ineffective in substance abuse prevention amongst the youth. And this study was made after the US government had already spent more than $1 billion on anti-drug PSAs, like this one, since the 1980s. But while this study suggested that the scare tactics of Snake wasn't enough to discourage drug use, the next PSA made Australians pick up the phone in a panic.
First, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it.
In 1987, Australia aired a PSA that opened with human legs dangling in mid-air. The humans could be seen being lowered to the floor by a pin setter, a machine that arranges bowling pins on the lane for the players to target. And at the other end of the lane was a hooded figure with a withered skull for a face. He watched the humans land on a lane before him. Men and women and one grade school girl stood before him as an ominous voice narrated.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS.
The cloaked Grim Reaper then pulled back his hand that held a large bowling ball. The girl at the other end could be heard crying, but she and the others still didn't move.
Were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every...
Then suddenly the Grim Reaper released the ball, letting it roll towards the group of humans. Now the girl could only look away before the ball crashed into all of them, knocking them to the ground. And right after that, the video showed their bodies lifeless on the floor. The narration continued saying that,
But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it. The fact is, over 50,000 men, women and children now carry the AIDS virus.
another set of humans were then lowered. This time it included a mother and her baby. And yet the Grim Reaper took another ball and released it towards them.
That in 3 years, nearly 2,000 of us will be dead.
This time he missed one pin, the mother and the baby. The mother looked down at the others, seeing them already dead. But the Grim Reaper wasn't done. He released another ball aimed directly at her and her child. The ball met its target, and both mother and child collapsed. The pinsetter then swept the bodies away, while the narrator warned how the virus could kill more Australians than World War II.
It could kill more Australians than World War II.
Meanwhile, the Grim Reaper turned away after finishing his game, only to reveal that dozens more were playing, happily tossing a ball towards their human pins. The PSA's message then appeared on screen, saying, "Prevention is the only cure we've got." The ad's message was a desperate attempt from the Australian government to keep their citizens from getting an incurable disease known as AIDS, the final stage of an untreated HIV infection. It was in 1982 when the country recorded its first AIDS diagnosis. Despite the virus entering the country, however, most Australians believed that AIDS only existed overseas, or that only gay men and IV drug users who injected drugs intravenously could contract it, not families, wives, or children.
It's that superficial idea of like, oh, we don't have to worry about it, it's a gay disease. Back then, that was the predominant view.
But this wasn't true, because after HIV testing was introduced in 1985, the hundreds of positive diagnoses proved that the disease could infect anyone, and it only got worse over time. By 1987, newly diagnosed HIV infections hit 2,773 cases in Australia in a single year. All these diagnoses were essentially death sentences, since at the time there was no treatment for the virus. And so the National Advisory Committee on AIDS, which operated between 1984 to 2003, was tasked with doing something about it. The government assigned them a budget of $3 million to create AIDS awareness campaigns. Their biggest problem, however, was the misconception about who was at risk of contracting the disease. Because of that, heterosexual Australians were tuning out the messages about the disease, thinking it was meant for someone else. But that conclusion was going to get people killed. And this prompted senior government health advisor Bill Battelle to commission then 21-year-old advertising copywriter Simon Reynolds to create a different type of campaign. In a 2008 interview with ABC, Simon explained, "Other countries had failed in their AIDS education because heterosexuals weren't listening. We really had to wake people up. There was a lot of information about how to stop AIDS out there, but no one was reading it." And with this in mind, Simon focused the bowling PSA on showing how anyone could be affected by this incurable disease. And this is why the video included Australians from all walks of life, including a mother and a child. Now, the PSA first aired on April 5th, 1987, and almost immediately became the most talked about ad in Australia. However, the public reaction was split. On one side, the ad worked as expected. Calls to AIDS-related hotlines rose by 327% in the first month alone, compared to the 7 months before the campaign launched. But this success came with a backlash. Critics called the video scaremongering and accused the government of manufacturing panic. Australia's LGBT community also criticized Simon's opening line that said, "At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed," which led to people accusing the LGBT community of causing this disease. On top of that, the appearance of the Grim Reaper during the opening line indirectly made the audience think that he represented the LGBT community. Australian AIDS pioneer Ron Penny commented that the downside was that the Grim Reaper became identified with gay men rather than as the Reaper. That was what we had unintentionally produced, the belief by some that the Reaper was people with HIV infection rather than the Reaper harvesting the dead. And because of all these controversies, the campaign, which was intended to run for 6 weeks, disappeared from Australian screens after only 3 weeks. Despite that, it became such a memorable ad that it's still being regarded as one of the most disturbing PSAs of all time. The Grim Reaper also made an appearance in the next video, but this time he enjoyed watching the deaths of the young and innocent in a place they all thought was safe.
The bank is slippery.
During the 1970s, drowning was the third most common cause of death in UK children, resulting in around 72 deaths per year. According to reports, most of these deaths happen in rivers, canals, and lakes. And alarmed by these statistics, the UK government began producing PSAs about water safety throughout this decade, with one specific PSA focused on informing the parents on how to keep their children safe around pools and water.
So have your children taught to swim. They're never too young to start, and once they get that confidence in the water, they love it.
And another used animation to appeal to kids watching.
Charlie says next time we go fishing, we should stay very close to Dad where he can look after us.
And when these weren't enough, the government produced another PSA that aired between commercial breaks of cartoon shows. This one, however, was designed to scare the kids into being more careful around the water, because death was watching. The ad, which first aired in 1973, opened on a dark and foggy lake, where a haunting voice could be heard speaking.
I am the spirit of dark and lonely water, ready to trap the unwary, the show-off, the fool.
A mysterious cloaked figure then appeared in the middle of the lake, who claimed to be the spirit of dark and lonely water. He watched kids play near the water, and when one boy attempted to reach a ball from the water using a stick, the spirit claimed,
But that pool is deep. The boy is showing off. The bank is slippery.
and as the spirit expected, the boy slipped in the mud and fell into the water. The friends who'd been cheering him on froze in horror. Elsewhere in the lake, another boy could be seen using a tree branch to steady himself while trying to fetch something in the water, though we don't see what he was actually trying to reach for. The spirit was amused by this.
This branch is weak, rotten. It'll never take his weight.
Now the spirit had a second victim. On another side of the lake, signs had been placed to warn people not to swim in the water. Aside from the deep water, the bank was full of abandoned items that were sharp and rusty, like old bikes and broken car parts. And the spirit called this,
It's the perfect place for an accident.
He said this as a teenager screamed for help while struggling to keep his head above the water. His friends heard him, and upon seeing the group arrive, the spirit turned and said,
Quick, use that big stick to get him out.
Sensible children. I have no power over them.
With the group he called sensible children coming to the rescue, the spirit disappeared. Soon the two teens had their friends back on the land. One of them grabbed the cloak that the spirits left behind, hoping to use it to warm their friends up. However, she ended up tossing it into the lake, thinking it was old and dirty. And as his cloak floated on the water, the spirit warned,
I'll be back.
The idea that the spirit of dark and lonely water was always watching and even enjoying seeing foolish kids meet their doom made an impression with children from the 70s. And like many of these PSAs, a copy of The Spirit of Dark and Lonely Water was uploaded to YouTube, allowing people who saw it as kids to relive the horror, while younger people witnessed the kind of scary media their parents grew up with. My father told me about this. He said that he was 5 when he first saw this, and the man in the cloak scared him to death. You can bet he never went near ponds or rivers. And this commenter's father wasn't the only one. People who grew up seeing this ad also shared their thoughts when the BBC News posted the video on their website, saying, It may have been scary, but it worked for me. I remember watching it sometime in the late 70s. Near where I lived as a child, there were a lot of very dangerous ponds, holding mine waste pumped from down the pits. It put me right off going anywhere near them. Another said, I was 9 years old when I saw this, and was completely traumatized. I still am. It has taken me 30 years to shake off the horror of swimming in water I cannot see the bottom of. Fortunately, drowning deaths did decline after the 1970s, though it still remained the third most common cause of death in UK children. While this PSA highlighted how dangerous it was to play in bodies of water, the next video showed the dangers that could happen to most adults in places they go to nearly every day.
Never put the deep fryer so close.
A woman introduced herself as a sous chef at a bustling restaurant. She didn't mention her name, but for this video, let's call her Sally. Sally added,
I'm the sous chef here. With any luck, I should be head chef by next year.
But that wasn't all she was looking forward to.
I've got this amazing fiance.
In those first 10 seconds of this ad, it seemed like an uplifting commercial, maybe for health insurance or a beauty product that featured a hardworking bride-to-be with their whole future ahead of her. But then the mood shifted.
Who I won't be marrying this weekend. Because I'm about to be in a terrible accident.
Sally then turned around to grab a large pot from a stove, and as she did, she mentioned how she should have cleaned the grease on the floor and how the kitchen's deep fryer was too close to her pad. And that was when the worst happened. Still holding the pot, Sally slipped on the grease on the floor. The pot's boiling contents spilled all over her face and into the deep fryer behind her. Her screams echoed throughout the busy kitchen, alerting her co-worker who rushed to help her. However, the spill from the fall had caused a tower of flames over the deep fryer, and to help Sally, her co-worker had to go near the fire. In an instant, Sally's hope of being promoted and getting married that weekend was cut short, and while the audience could still hear her screams and her co-worker's cries for help, the video ended with a message. There really are no accidents. This shocking ad, titled Top Chef, was produced by the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, or WSIB in Canada. The video was part of their campaign titled There Are No Accidents, which argued how workplace accidents like what happened to the sous chef were caused by not following safety procedures, not by chance or bad luck. The There Are No Accidents campaign began in 2006, with the first PSAs featuring a forklift driver backing into a shelf of steel bars, causing them to fall directly on him. a retail worker hanging up a sign only to fall right into a glass display, and a welder getting blown up by faulty tanks. However, Sally's video, which aired in Canadian televisions in November of 2007, became the most memorable of them for the shocking turn of events. A List Verse article in 2022 even ranked Top Chef as their second most unsettling PSA, saying, "Forget about safe working practices. This thing will make you never want to step into a kitchen again." The creative director behind the ad, Robin Heisey, shared in a December 2007 interview that the intensity of this ad aimed to force people to pay attention. This was because 101 people were reported to have been killed in preventable workplace accidents in 2006 alone, and by December 2007, another 98 deaths were reported. In the same interview, Robin stressed how, if 80 workers were all killed in a day in a factory fire, for example, that would make headlines all over the world. But since it's spread out over a year, nobody notices. And to remind people outside their homes, the campaign also included posters set up on the streets to be seen by those heading toward their actual workplace. However, not everyone appreciated the graphic images of the workplace safety campaign. The Transit Windsor Board of Directors refused to place these posters on their bus shelters, while transit authorities in Hamilton and Mississauga only agreed to set up modified versions of the posters. Now, despite this, WSIB chairman Steve Mahoney told CBC News on December 13, 2007 that they won't apologize for the campaign's graphic nature, since the ads were purposely controversial to spur reaction and awareness. But following this year, this changed. The 2008 PSAs now featured workplace accidents being prevented by safety measures. In an October 24, 2008 interview, Steve explained that you can make people immune to things if you have too much violence. And the point is, we're about prevention, so it was my view that it was time to show how these things can be prevented. And while the WSIB's ads now focused on prevention, the next British ad pointed directly at people committing violence to their loved ones.
Well, who's that?
Nicole?
Oh, you and your mates.
In 2009, the UK government began a femicide census, where they tracked the number of reports of female deaths at the hands of a man. In that first year, they reported that 134 women were being killed by men, with most of the reported homicides being at the hands of an intimate partner. Making matters worse, the British Parliament's research also showed that many of these homicides started from domestic violence, which were unlikely to be reported. Their study suggested that many victims didn't believe that the situation was a police matter, or feared that their partner would retaliate. So in the following year, the UK government produced the This Is Abuse campaign, but instead of the message being directed to the victims or witnesses of domestic violence, the PSA spoke directly to the perpetrators. The 1 minute and 20-second ad featured a teen couple who we'll call Jessica and Mike, watching TV in the lady's bedroom. Jessica asked about his football game, and her boyfriend bragged about their win, but then, as if asking for a reward for the win, Mike suddenly started touching Jessica's leg, asking her to have a bit of fun before her parents returned. Jessica knew exactly what he meant, but she refused since she only wanted to watch TV, and in response, Mike hinted that he'll spread a rumor that she was frigid, a term in the UK used to describe a woman who was uninterested in intimacy. She argued that this didn't apply to her since they've already done it before, but Mike kept pushing her to being intimate with her, and after she said no multiple times, she received a text message from her friend. This distracted her from their conversation for a moment, but it was enough to make her boyfriend angry. He then threw her phone away and then blamed her for making him do it, and when Jessica picked up her device from the floor, things escalated.
Don't talk to me like that.
Mike became physically aggressive and grabbed her by the hair. Jessica went still, visibly afraid of what he'll do. And this was when the PSA revealed the twist. Beyond the room was another version of Mike, watching the entire scene. But there was a glass wall separating him from Jessica and his other self. And as he watched himself getting violent with his girlfriend, Mike began pounding at the glass, trying to get his other self to stop as the attack continued. On the other side of the room, Jessica could be seen crying and begging him to stop since he was hurting her. But his response was to only call her pathetic. The one watching them then continued banging on the glass, demanding the violent Mike to leave her alone. But his efforts weren't successful, and ultimately Jessica gave in and offered intimacy to her violent boyfriend, so he'd stop hurting her. And this finally convinced him to let her go, though he complained that she'd have to put him in the mood again after making him angry. Now Jessica sank back in her bed, holding back her tears while her boyfriend, the one in the room with her, told her to begin. All the while the other Mike could only watch from behind the glass, as his alter ego unbuckled his belt. At this point the PSA's message then flashed on the screen, asking perpetrators of domestic violence, if you could see yourself, would you stop yourself? Now this PSA went from a couple watching TV to violence and forced intimacy in under 2 minutes, representing how quickly domestic violence could happen. But this PSA was only one part of the UK government's strategy to end such incidents. In 2010, they also introduced the Call to End Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, announcing their plans to make stricter laws against stalking, forced marriage, and domestic violence. The Would You Stop Yourself PSA showed a realistic example of what people might be going through even today. Meanwhile, this next one gives us a painful look at how one decision could lead to an experience similar to medieval torture.
Soon, the rats would get hungry.
In the 1970s, heroin made its way into Singapore, and within a couple of years, more than 3% of Singapore's entire young male population had become addicted to it. Then, between 1973 and 1975, heroin addiction increased by 200%, so the Singaporean government began implementing harsh punishments in the hopes of reducing these numbers, targeting both the consumers and the traffickers. Law enforcement officers started arresting anyone who had a connection to the heroin problem. Their sentences went from harsh corporal punishments like being beaten with canes to simply the death penalty. And despite the heavy punishments, the epidemic didn't stop. And by 1994, the government decided that they needed to prevent people from ever trying heroin in the first place. And so the same year, the Central Narcotics Bureau, or CNB, created the Committee to Improve the Drug Situation in Singapore. This committee focused not on punishing those who fell victim to the drugs. Instead, they established preventative drug education, rigorous enforcement, treatment and rehabilitation for drug abusers, and finally aftercare and continued rehabilitation for ex-drug abusers to reintegrate them into society. Now, the idea of preventative drug education created the Partnership for a Drug-Free Singapore, which produced a series of PSA videos to discourage their citizens from trying out drugs. And though this was supposed to reduce the chances of people trying out drugs, the PSAs themselves became a new form of torture. Each PSA depicted a different kind of horror to show the many struggles of drug abuse. In 1998, they aired Toilet Roll and Sweat, two jarring ads depicting withdrawal symptoms from drug abuse. But then in 1999, the Partnership for a Drug-Free Singapore created an ad that portrayed the horrors that went through the minds and bodies of heroin addicts. And from the very first second of the video, we see the silhouette of a man chained to the floor. He thrashed around while the narrator said,
"In the Middle Ages, death by torture was an art form."
The chained man was then transferred to a metal bed with all of his limbs restrained. The narrator then went on to describe one of the most horrible forms of torture in medieval times. This punishment involved a bound prisoner with a cage over his stomach, filled with hungry rats. And without going too much into the gory details, let's just say that the rats would have to eat their way out of the cage to escape. And that was exactly what the PSA showed. The prisoner screamed as the rats found a way to eat their way out of the cage. And after the prisoner died, the corpse left behind began to rot away. The video then showed the same man, but this time he was alone, lying down on the floor. No rats or chains were around. Instead, the narrator explained,
"Today, people just take heroin."
The Partnership's warning then flashed on the screen, saying 4 out of 5 who try heroin never escape. Heroin is living hell. Comparing heroin use to a medieval torture method did have an effect on the people who watched it, with a YouTube comment saying, "Would you do heroin after this ad? I wouldn't." Now, despite how gory this PSA video was, no significant public backlash from the Singaporean people was documented online. But at the same time, there was no study to confirm if the PSA actually discouraged their people from ever trying the drug. And nearly 2 decades later, Singapore's Central Narcotics Bureau arrested 847 heroin abusers in 2017. This hinted that the country's problem with this drug hadn't fully disappeared. Instead, rats from the Heroin is Living Hell campaign went on to become one of the most extreme anti-drug PSAs ever created. Meanwhile, the next PSA showed a real-life version of Hell on Earth.
In April 1994, Hell arrived on Earth and stayed in Rwanda for 100 terrible days.
Somewhere around 1995, American TV started showing an ad containing the footage of a small African child crying. It was then replaced by a message saying, "We know you hate being asked for money." Next, the video showed a frail-looking toddler walking in a ruined city, and around were men who were looking ahead, walking without noticing the small child. Another clip showed a crying child standing in front of something on fire. Then another boy was seen squatting on the ground, as if having nowhere else to sit. He was so thin that his head looked too heavy for his body. And the next message flashed on the screen, "So please send your old shoe boxes." Then the message faded away to show one more child, curled up in a fetal position on the ground. More children were also shown lying on the ground, most of them covered up in sheets of fabric. As the video's message finally became clear, "We're running out of coffins." And then the logo for the Africa Relief Fund encouraged the viewers to give what you can. And the grim message was made more disturbing by the fact that the video showed real footage of African children who were still suffering while Americans watched from their homes. The Shoeboxes PSA aired in February of 1995, less than a year after the Rwandan genocide ended. From April 7th to July 19th, 1994, Rwanda, a country in East Africa, experienced 100 days of systematic killing. The genocide started from the tension between Rwanda's two main tribes, the Hutu and the Tutsi. The rivalry started in 1897, when German colonizers favored the Tutsi over the Hutu by giving them authority and spreading the belief that their group was superior. And even after the Germans left the country in 1916, the tension between the tribes remained. Then on April 6, 1994, a plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and Burundi President Cyprien Cyprien Ntaryamira, who were both from the Hutu tribe, was shot down. Everyone on board, including the two presidents, were killed. And though no one figured out who shot the plane down, the Hutu tribe blamed their rivals. And with the Rwandan government already in shambles after the sudden death of their president, armed Hutu groups ordered their citizens to kill the Tutsi people and remove them from their country on the same day. Lieutenant Bizumurumi even told citizens, "The soldiers have to do their work. As for you, you're also going to begin your work. Spare no one, not even babies. Do it quickly so that in the morning we shall have finished." With men, women and even children and infants targeted, the 100-day genocide claimed the lives of 1,074,017 people. An estimated 300,000 of those victims were innocent children who had nothing to do with the battle, and few of those who survived had to even hide among corpses to escape being killed. Now the genocide ended on July 19, 1994, after the Tutsi-led Rwandan Patriotic Front recaptured most of the country's territories from the invaders. Now even during the attacks, humanitarian efforts were helping the survivors recover. One of them was Africa, an international NGO focused on supporting African nations. But the horrors committed in those 100 days were so severe that the emergency healthcare and food provisions they were giving to survivors weren't actually enough. Providing for survivors was expensive, and the nations began running dry months after the genocide ended, as people began to forget. And with the nations running low, Africa released the Shoeboxes PSA, serving as a reminder that without help, there wasn't even enough money to bury the dead. And over a decade later, it was uploaded on YouTube, allowing more people to see the horrors that most of them had probably never heard about. Commenters noted, "When they said they're running out of coffins, my jaw dropped." The video even made one commenter realize their luck, saying, "This was the year I was born. As my mother held me in the hospital, thousands of babies were being murdered en masse for the crime of being born to the wrong tribe. Makes me think." And while this video made a lasting effect, Africa released no report on whether the PSA helped them gather more funds for their relief efforts. Now during the genocide, Rwandan children feared the strangers breaking down their doors. The next PSA showed how sometimes children fear the very people they lived with though. In 2009, a study found that alcohol was officially the #1 killer of Finnish adults, claiming more victims than even heart disease and cancer. It was responsible for 17% of all deaths among men between the ages of 15 and 64. For women, it caused over 10% of all deaths, reaching the same number as breast cancer. Now this data came 5 years after the country reduced the tax on alcohol in 2004 to compete with cheaper liquors coming in from the neighboring country, Estonia. Unfortunately, the cheaper prices made alcohol abuse more affordable, leading to a country where heavy drinking was normal during the weekends. And making matters worse was that their health wasn't the only thing that some adults destroyed with alcohol. 1/4 of all Finnish children reported having problems with an alcoholic parent, and over half of that group even witnessed violence at home, leading to them losing trust in their parents and guardians who were supposed to protect them. And this issue inspired the founding of a non-profit organization called Fragile Childhood in 1986. Fragile Childhood aimed to help children of alcoholic parents by spreading awareness and providing a platform for both kids and adults to share their stories. However, even after decades since Fragile Childhood was created, many people in Finland still believe that alcoholism was something a person handled privately. And so, to highlight the struggles of children of alcoholics, Fragile Childhood produced a PSA in 2012 to show how these kids might be seeing their parents when they're drunk. The video opened to several kids in normal situations. A girl walked with her mother on the street. A boy was hanging out on the playground, while another boy was getting into their parents' car. One more kid played soccer with friends, and a girl was trying to enjoy a sundae at dinner. But none of these kids were happy. And as the girl with the sundae turned to her father, it was clear why. In the place of her father was a man with a giant rabbit's head. But this rabbit wasn't like a stuffed animal. Its eyes were wide and red, its teeth were rotting, and its skin was sagging and dark. Meanwhile, the child at the playground saw their mother in a dark cloak, like that of the Grim Reaper. Afraid, he backed away from her even though she waved at him. The girl walking on the street kept her eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at her mother, who had turned into a zombie. And the boy playing soccer got distracted, since his father was a deranged clown with sullen eyes. Another girl was getting ready to leave the hospital, but she fought against her father, whose angry eyes frightened her despite him wearing a Santa Claus costume. And finally, the boy who'd gotten inside his father's car refused to look at the man buckling him in, since he wore a stalking mask like the bank robbers he'd seen on TV. And after locking the seatbelt in place, the father slammed the door shut, making the son flinch. Now the boy heaved as he watched his father circle around to the driver's seat. Here the PSA's message was shown: "How do our children see us when we've been drinking?" Then the PSA encouraged the viewers to speak out to help us change the way we behave. The children in the video did not scream or run away from the monsters that watched over them, because they were their parents. And this was the problem that many kids in Finland faced. When Monsters premiered in Finland in September of 2012, it immediately went viral. CNN picked it up and featured it in that same month.
What you're about to see might just be the creepiest, and most terrifying public service announcement anywhere in the world right now.
It was also posted on Fragile Childhood's official YouTube page on September 11th, 2012, where it got over 1 million views in just 1 week. Grace Jones, a counselor with the Al-Anon family group, described the video message as, "Those are monsters there, and that's what our loved ones become once they put something in their system." She also described how sometimes children who witness their parents succumb to alcoholism end up in the same path as adults, saying they become a monster trying to fight the monster. In the hopes of ending the cycle, Fragile Childhood added a link to their Facebook account in their video, promising the viewers that they can share your thoughts anonymously on parental alcohol use. And this encouraged people to share their first-hand experiences. And soon the campaign extended outside the TV screens, and real stories from anonymous people became the central point of the campaign's printed ads. "For me, it took a long time to find out why I liked my mother more in the mornings instead of the evenings." Another anonymous person shared, "I can remember learning in school not to drink and drive, and then have to get in the car with my drunk dad after every family function." Fortunately, Finland's total alcohol consumption had been consistently declining for over a decade, even before the campaign aired. However, the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare still remained concerned about the amount of children affected by a guardian's alcohol use. In their 2024 findings, they estimated that there were still 89,000 underage persons in Finland whose one biological parent or both parents have a serious substance abuse problem at some point before the child's adulthood. Though the number of affected children didn't decrease, Tovio Peltoniemi, author of 17 books about alcoholism, found that PSAs like monsters still provided hope. In a CNN interview in 2012, he shared that,
"Normally it doesn't work, but we have now the idea that once we have been working for 2 decades already with the soft method, so that people do know there is help available." But alcohol wasn't the only reason a loved one could turn violent, and the next PSA showed how badly things could go wrong while focused solely on the gruesome effects on the victim.
Dreaming of mercy.
In the very first second of this horrifying PSA, the audience was met with the face of a woman who'd been beaten. The video had no dialogue, so we didn't learn her name. So for the sake of this video, let's call her Andrea. Tears ruined Andrea's mascara, though this was the least of her worries, because her makeup was meant to cover the bruise on her right eye. The eye itself was red, and a gash ran across it, as if she'd been scratched. With shaky hands, she covered the wounds with another layer of makeup, but as she did, another bruise appeared on her left forehead. She tried to hide that too with some makeup, but a fresh bruise on her neck emerged, as if the injuries won't stop reappearing. She paused for a bit to touch the sore muscle there, recalling what caused the bruise that was starting to turn black and purple, and as she did, her left eye became dark and swollen too. A cut appeared across the bridge of her nose, and her right forehead opened with wounds. All the while, Andrea took deep breaths as if to calm herself, but her calm was broken when blood started to stream down from her nose. She wiped the blood away, but it was no use. As her nose continued to bleed, Andrea fought back a sob while tears welled up in her eyes. She took a few more breaths to stop the tears from falling, and this was when the campaign's message appeared just above her shoulder. "It rarely stops." Then all of a sudden, Andrea turned to the direction of the door, as if someone had arrived. Her eyes were wide, and she looked like she was about to crouch away. The woman, covered in wounds, bruises, and blood, was afraid of what's behind that bathroom door. And then the screen cut to black. The audience wasn't given a chance to see what was about to happen. The only thing they saw was the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. Now this PSA's message is pretty clear. Domestic violence rarely stops, and this was something the organization had learned from real-life experiences. According to a report by the Bureau of Justice Statistics that was published in September of 2009, about 552,000 women experienced violent incidents from a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, or an ex. A total of 101,000 men also suffered from some sort of violence by an intimate partner. Now another study conducted in 2007 also confirmed that 14% of all homicides in the United States were committed by someone in a relationship with their victim, and 70% of those victims were women. And according to the National Crime Survey, these kinds of violence were significantly underreported because of the subject's sensitive nature. This was why the National Domestic Violence Hotline was established in 1994, providing a 24-hour service for people seeking help from these incidents. But even though the hotline had existed for more than a decade, the number of cases of non-fatal and fatal domestic violence were still pretty high, and so the National Domestic Violence Hotline produced a PSA titled "It Rarely Stops" in 2010. The video was released across YouTube and social media platforms, reaching audiences beyond traditional advertising channels like televisions. However, it wasn't enough for them to just that victims know their hotline number. Some victims knew that the number existed, but some were simply in denial, paralyzed by shame, or didn't yet understand what was happening to them. This is why It Rarely Stops shows viewers how a woman was unable to erase all wounds from domestic violence before a new one appeared. The team behind the ad wanted to spread the awareness about what thousands of people face daily, while warning them that it was rare for this kind of violence to stop without intervention. Now within days, the video got over 250,000 views on the official YouTube upload alone, and online visits to the National Domestic Violence Hotline website increased by 309%, or over 1.5 million additional visits per year. Now the hotline's contact volume also increased by 43% in the 5 years following the PSA's release, making this video a success in encouraging potential victims to speak up and get the help they actually need. And while It Rarely Stops encouraged victims to ask for help, the next series of PSA videos had been trying to educate people for decades, since the only ones who could prevent the following tragedies were the viewers themselves.
It is quite clear that you were driving too fast to cope with the unexpected.
Between the 1980s and the early 1990s, young adults and teens in Northern Ireland began daring each other to go on a joyriding trip. This meant that they'd steal a car for the sole purpose of driving it for fun. Now with these people high on excitement and possibly other substances, joyriding led to many road accidents, with Northern Ireland even reporting up to 157 deaths from road accidents in 1994, though not all of them were from joyriding. In response to the growing number of accidents, their government launched the Road Traffic Order in 1995, which made numerous changes to keep the roads safer for its citizens, and part of their attempts were a series of graphic road safety videos they played on TV to scare thousands of viewers. The first was a road safety ad that originally ran in the UK during 1995. The ad was titled Thoughts, which showed a young woman getting into a car with her date. The couple was all smiles at first, but the man started erratically swerving around traffic, overtaking other cars to move faster, and this made his date nervous.
Sunshiny day, speak child, don't wanna stay alive when you're 25. I'm a shooter.
Then when they reached the open roads outside the city, the man sped up the car, scaring his date even further.
I'm a shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger, defying the laws of gravity.
Now she tried to advise him to slow down, but he just smiled and continued, as if thinking that his actions were actually impressive. Soon the road became packed with cars again, and the man got irritated while yelling at the cars that moved slowly. The man then switched lanes to overtake the other vehicles. However, what he didn't see was a family car in front of the van that he was trying to overtake. Now the girl at the back seat looked up just in time before the man's car crashed into her family's vehicle. The couple's car slammed into the other, causing it to flip over. And witnessing the scene, the driver of the slow van turned out to be an old lady who screamed alongside the parents of the flipped car. This was because their daughter had been flung out the vehicle during the crash, and her body was now lifeless on the street.
But it's over now. It must have been good, but I lost it so.
Now emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. They took away the girl's body while the driver couldn't do anything but watch. The ad then advised viewers to
death by reckless driving, 5 years in prison.
Wise up. Slow down. Expect the unexpected.
The shocking accident and the image of the girl's body disturbed a lot of TV audiences, who witnessed this with their families during daytime shows. But while the country reacted to this ad in horror, Northern Ireland's DOE, or Department of Environment, became inspired with a new way to promote road safety for their country. And this was seemingly effective, as road accident deaths dropped from 157 in 1994 to 144 in 1995. And the number of injuries caused by these accidents also dropped by 3.1%, although in total the number of accidents actually slightly decreased in 1995. Recording 6,792 accidents compared to 1994's 6,783. Still, the DOE saw the decrease in the number of deaths and injuries as proof that the shocking road safety ad was effective. So in the years to come, their road safety PSAs would continue down this graphic path to scare reckless drivers off the street. In 1999, they released an ad called Thumb. It showed a group of young adults having fun while driving along an empty road. The narration then said,
Young men think they're great drivers.
As if on cue, the driver of the car sped up, only to find himself headed straight towards a slow-moving truck, and to avoid crashing into it, he made a sharp turn, but this led him to collide with another truck and sent his car flying.
Therefore, drive too fast to cope with the unexpected.
Next, we see him and his friends under his ruined car, covered in blood, with only one of them making a sound to suggest that she was still alive.
And therefore destroy more lives on our roads than any other drivers.
The next scene showed that after the accident, the driver was now in a wheelchair after the accident left him disabled and traumatized. The narrator then advised the viewers to
slow down, boys.
The realistic crash scene and the aftermath was more gruesome than the thoughts at, but even without the bloody scenes, the DOE had other ways to shock their audience. In 2000, the DOE produced another video titled Shape, which showed a grade school level soccer enthusiast playing in his backyard with his sister and father.
Shall I tell you about my life? Say I'm a man of the world. I've flown across every time.
The scene was innocent and even happy, but then it switched to a man joining a soccer practice with friends. This man seemed to be the kid we saw earlier, all grown up to achieve his dreams.
Guess I've got everything I need.
Now we follow this character as he enjoys some drinks at a bar with his friends, but then he begins driving home with a big smile on his face, right after he'd had a couple of drinks, and because of that he accidentally swerved his car, hitting the curb that caused his wheel to loosen. Now he tried correcting his path, but ended up getting hit by another car, which sent him rolling to the side.
I wouldn't ask more, and there's no one I'd rather be.
And then the revelation. The soccer fan from earlier was still in his backyard. The man we saw wasn't actually the kid. Instead, his car crashed into their home's fence and collided with the innocent kid who was just hanging out in his own home. Now his father rushed out to the house after hearing his daughter's screams as she'd witnessed what happened. And while the drunk driver climbed out of his vehicle covered in scratches, the father raced to his son. And in seconds, he confirmed that his son was already dead and he could do nothing but more. Then the drunk driver looked at the scene, realizing what he'd done. As the father cried, the narrator warned the audience,
Never ever drink and drive. Could you live with the shame? From DOE, supported by AXA Insurance.
Now this video disturbed a lot of people. First, the victim was a child like the Thoughts video, but what's worse is that he wasn't on the road, but in his home's backyard, a supposed safe place that was destroyed by a car that crashed inside. And making matters worse, this ad aired on Nickelodeon, a popular kids channel. Now Nickelodeon would end up receiving some backlash for airing the ad, as it was showing a victim as young as their audience being involved in a sudden and fatal accident. However, the complaints weren't enough to take the ad off Nickelodeon. The PSA was also shown between trailers and cinemas, giving moviegoers a larger screen to witness the horrible tragedy. Thankfully, it was restricted for movies rated 15, so it wasn't actually played during kids' movies. Now the DOE continued to make more of these violent road safety ads, and the next one gave its viewers a closer, more detailed look at how gruesome a car accident could look like. In 2002, just 2 years after the controversial Shame ad, the DOE released their first video for the No Seatbelt, No Excuse campaign, called Damage. This one showed a man named Michael on a date with his girlfriend before they know everything looked normal so far, until the narrator revealed what would happen to Michael.
This is Michael. Today he's going to hit his girlfriend so hard she ends up with permanent brain damage.
Doing this, Michael's girlfriend was shown putting her seatbelt on, but her boyfriend didn't do the same. And because of that, when their car crashed into another, Michael was thrown off his seat violently, and everything then played in slow motion. Now as the force threw him towards the windshield, Michael bumped into the woman sitting in the passenger seat. Now she did have a seatbelt on, but Michael pushing against her shoulder made her head slam against the window beside her. Then a second car hit them from behind, and this caused him to bounce back to the backseat, and his hip slammed against the driver's face with a crushing sound, implying that this caused his neck to break. Finally, Michael crashed against his girlfriend's head, with everything still playing in slow motion, with the viewers witnessing how one mistake could end multiple lives in seconds. After this, the video transitioned to that evening, when emergency services had already worked on the scene, and one officer recounted that 3 of the passengers were dead, with Michael's girlfriend being the only survivor. The officer then said,
3 dead in this vehicle. The girl is critical. They say the guy without the seatbelt did the damage.
No seatbelt, no excuse. From DOE, supported by AXA Insurance.
Now this ad actually ran for 2 years, between 2002 and 2004, showing TV viewers a slowed version of an accident escalating into a full tragedy in mere seconds. But it wasn't actually seen only on televisions. This horrible event was also plastered on posters. They were seen on the streets of Ireland, reminding passengers and drivers to put their seatbelt on. Now their next ad followed the same premise, with a young couple being the center and a slowed down view of the events to highlight each painful moment. This one, however, left viewers even more uncomfortable. 2007 marked the airing of one of DOE's most controversial ads, titled Mess. It showed a young couple having a romantic moment by the side of the road, and suddenly a nearby car flipped over, causing other drivers to panic and crash into each other.
I can't take my eyes off you.
Now before they could react, the first car skidded against the road and crashed against the young couple, crushing the man's body against his girlfriend, whose legs were trapped between him and the wall. Now the victims from the other cars also screamed, while a mother on the side of the road grabbed her child away from the horrible scene. Soon the road was filled with first responders and volunteers trying to save the victims, whose cries and screams of pain still filled the audience's ear. Meanwhile, the driver of the first vehicle was taken away, while one of the victims was pronounced dead, and the young woman, crushed between the wall and her boyfriend's body, continued to shriek in pain and terror. Now the young woman would undergo surgeries to save her life, while her boyfriend's parents could only mourn the loss of their son. Eventually, she attended the trial of the driver who caused it all, learning that he was speeding when a dog distracted him. This caused him to swerve violently and flip his car, leading to all those deaths and injuries.
It is quite clear that you were driving too fast to cope with the unexpected.
The video closed with a young woman in a wheelchair, staring at the grave of her deceased boyfriend. The narration then told the audience,
The faster the speed, the bigger the mess. From the Road Safety Authority, supported by Hibernian.
The graphic slow-motion scene, the horrified look of the witnesses, and the wails of pain from the victims made this ad one of the most memorable and shocking ones. And it didn't only play on TV. Schools in Northern Ireland also showed this video to their students to warn young drivers against speeding. And even recently, with the video being uploaded to YouTube, the ad continues to scare drivers, with one commenter saying, "This almost makes me want to never drive a moving vehicle again. Being the cause of all this would make me wish I died in the accident." Now reactions like these kept these PSAs running. However, in 2014, DOE's anti-speeding PSA went a little too far, releasing an ad that to this day is still considered the most infamous and shocking video they've done yet. This video began with a classroom of young children getting ready for a field trip, while a rendition of the song "Sweet of Child, Oh Mine" played, as the video switched to a man getting ready for his day before heading to his car.
He's got a smile that it seems to me reminds me of childhood memories where everything was as fresh as the bright blue sky.
Now the children soon arrived at a park where they enjoyed nature and a picnic with their teachers, and during this the man drove his car to his destination.
And when I see her face, she takes me away to that special place. And if I stayed too long, I'd probably break down and cry.
but when he sped up, his car slid on the road. Now the car flipped, crashing against a stone wall that separated the road from the park, and he screamed while the children at the picnic watched his car fly above them. Now the vehicle then landed, and the whole class was flattened under its weight. The narration then shared that since the year 2000, speeding had ended the lives of many children, enough to fill a whole classroom. The narrator then addressed the audience, saying,
"Since 2000, speeding has killed a classroom of our children. Shame on you. You can never control the consequences if you speed."
Now this ad ran in Northern Ireland cinemas for movies rated 15, but it also ran on televisions for families to watch in their homes. Now for obvious reasons, it sparked the most horrified reactions from viewers, with many claiming that seeing it made them cry. And these reactions assured DOE Minister Mark Durkan that the ad was the most sensitive and powerful that they've ever done. And since it was released during the time of social media, the ad quickly went viral online, giving it an international audience. But with this wider audience, it began having an opposite effect. Instead of scaring people from speeding, commenters actually began joking about how over the top the scenario was, with one YouTube user saying, "If a speeding driver managed to cause that much death to children with skid and roll, I'd be morally obligated to high-five him if he survived, because as horrific as death is, that was impressive. What a stupid PSA. Show realistic scenarios that highlight actual dangers, not over-the-top action movies." People also questioned the narration addressing the audience, as the PSA fandom website, which collected information on famous PSA ads, commented, "The announcer saying shame on you to the viewer at the end also doesn't work, since many viewers haven't killed anyone while driving." Now not long after this ad went viral, the DOE stopped producing new ones. That was because the group was actually discontinued after the Irish government's restructuring in 2016. Meanwhile, the infamous Shame on You ad continues to air on Northern Ireland TVs to this day, currently being managed by the Department for Infrastructure, though it has been restricted to only be shown after 9 in the evening to avoid being viewed by children. Now while this set of PSA videos had no problem showing blood to depict horrifying accidents, the next one skipped showing graphic imagery. Instead, it focused on a victim that many people never considered, and this victim was about to lose everything because of someone else's mistake.
Nepřijedem pozdě? Stihneme to? Neboj, šlápnu na to.
In 1994, just a year after the Czech Republic became an independent nation, it recorded 1,473 deaths from road accidents. So in 2008, the Czech Ministry of Transport commissioned a campaign called "You'll Pay for Not Thinking" in the hopes of reducing these accidental deaths. Part of this campaign were 3 short films that served as PSA videos to run on television, although because of how graphic these videos actually were, the Czech Republic could only run them after 10 PM. And here we'll discuss one of these videos that proved to be the most shocking despite not showing even one frame of the accident. Instead, the video showed an animation of a pregnant woman's womb, where an embryo was fast asleep. In the background, the voice of its mother and a man, likely the father, could be heard.
Nepřijedem pozdě? Stihneme to? Neboj, šlápnu na to.
They were in a hurry to get somewhere, so they headed inside the car. The sound of the car door opening and closing was followed by the engine being started and the wheels turning. Now these sounds actually woke the embryo inside the woman's body, and immediately it braced itself as the car began to speed up. Now wheels screeched as the car seemed to maneuver violently from side to side, tossing the distressed embryo inside the womb. Now sensing the danger, the embryo looked around worriedly as the car didn't sound like it was slowing down, and horn from other vehicles could be heard, and the embryo was then tossed to the side again. Then its mother screams, and the embryo's world turned violently as the car crashed and flipped, shaking the little one until everything stopped turning. And inside the womb that was filling with blood now, the embryo now floated, not moving. The screen then turned to black, and the campaign's message was shown telling everyone, "Don't decide on the lives of others with your aggressive driving." Now the ad had no big crash scene, nor did it have an image of a car, just sound effects to portray what was happening, and the most innocent victim possibly shown having no control of its fate. And maybe this was why reports from TV broadcasters found that people who watched this ad felt more affected by it than any other part of the "You'll Pay for Not Thinking" campaign. Now the PSA ran throughout 2008, and like the campaign had hoped, the Czech Republic's road death toll fell below 1,000 since then. Unfortunately, the next video also involved a young victim, but this time the crime this PSA depicted was no accident.
Hey Sam, where's the white bag? I don't know. What's wrong?
Just leave me alone. Are you okay?
As early as 2010, studies suggested that 1 in 5 young people in Europe experiences some sort of intimate attack, and what made this number so disturbing was that between 70 and 85% of the victims know their abuser. So the perpetrator wasn't a stranger, but someone they trusted. Some of them might even be living under the same roof as their attacker, and unfortunately a third of these victims never tell anyone. Some are ashamed or feel guilty, while others are terrified that nobody would believe them or that telling someone would destroy their family. So in 2010, the Council of Europe launched the 1 in 5 campaign, which had a straightforward mission of equipping victims, families, and societies with the knowledge to prevent and report these intimate attacks. Now, the campaign also pushed European governments to improve the Lanzarote Convention, a binding agreement to prevent exploitation and violence against those who aren't of age. Now, this campaign, along the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, or PACE, then produced a short film titled The Lake that was released on November 13th, 2013, which was just 1 week before the UN Children's Day. Now, the short film was released in 4 languages and freely available to every broadcaster in Europe without any copyright restrictions. And this was decided so the film could reach as many people as possible to spread awareness. Now, the film told the story of Lisa, a young woman who looked like she'd only been on this planet for a little more than a decade. Now, she was in the middle of a forest, breathing heavily while looking like she'd just stopped herself from crying. A man then approached her from behind, we'll call him Adam, and she tensed up just before he placed his hand on her shoulder. Adam pulled her back to her feet before placing her sweater properly over her arm and clearing the leaves stuck to her hair, all the while the young woman averted her eyes from him. Adam then said,
"Don't tell your mother, not a word."
Lisa agreed before walking away, and as she did, the man fixed a button on his shirt. Soon Lisa reached the lakeshore, where a large group of people were happily having a picnic. Her mother, whom we'll call Joanne, then ran up to Lisa with a smile, unaware of what her daughter just went through. Lisa ignored her and walked to a spot where she could sit alone.
Lisa! Where's the white bag? Don't know. What's wrong? Just leave me alone. Are you okay?
Adam now joined the group, and Joanne soon sat next to him and planted a kiss on his lips. Seeing this made Lisa look away, but instead of anger, she pursed her lips and looked down. Joanne then announced that she and Adam were engaged. Adam had been dating Lisa's mother, and soon he would be her stepfather, living under the same roof. Now, the announcement was followed by a series of voices overlapping each other in Lisa's mind, as she realized the near future ahead of her. In the next scene, Lisa walked into the water along with the kids at the picnic. However, she wasn't going into the lake for a simple swim. At first, she swam far from the group, trying to escape the cheerful people that didn't notice what was happening. But then she stopped and let her body sink into the murky water. Now, underwater, Lisa did not move. She didn't thrash or fight to get back to the surface. Instead, she seemed calm, since things had now gone quiet. Now, Lisa stayed underwater for a long while, until her eyes suddenly snapped open, and so quickly she swam back to the surface and caught her breath. And as she looked around the area, she could still hear the laughter from the picnic. No one even noticed that she tried to let the lake take her. Now, after that, the 1 in 5 campaign logo appeared, along with the logo for the Council of Europe. On top of them, they reminded the audience that 1 in 5 smaller humans is a victim of intimate violence. Break the silence. Now, the film wasn't as graphic in showing the crisis that 1 in 5 was fighting, but instead, they focused on how it affected the innocent, from Lisa's silence and shame to what she thought was the only way to escape. Now, before this PSA film was even launched, filmmaker Roland Edzard, who directed directed this, explained, "I wanted to say to young people who are victims of this crime, it is possible to break the secret pact of silence that your aggressor is imposing on you. And in practical terms, the number given at the end of the film can help you do that." Now, since its launch, the campaign also released a 30-second edited version, along with an international version, where the voices have been removed to allow others to dub it in their own language, and release it to other countries. And by 2015, the Lake won the European Association of Communications Agencies Care Award, with the organization calling the campaign an absolute breakthrough. And while speaking about this achievement, the then PACE president, Embryo, shared that an estimated 6 million people have seen the film so far on a number of European TV stations, and around 1.2 million more online. Now, the success of The Lake inspired a follow-up film called The Stadium, which was released on November 17, 2022, nearly a decade after the first film. This time it told the story of a young soccer player, who we'll call Tom, who was approached by his coach in the shower room. Now let's call this coach Coach Charlie. Now Charlie promised him to put him in the first lineup of players in the game, but this news didn't make the soccer player happy at all. More disturbingly, Charlie added,
"I'm gonna put you in the first team. Are we together or not together?"
Now the scene then switched to a soccer game, where Tom remained distracted by his coach's presence. Still, he tried to participate in the game, only to suddenly lash out at another player, punching him repeatedly. Until Charlie had to pull him aside. Charlie then pinned him to the ground to calm him down, but Tom looked at him with a mix of disdain and rage. Now, much like The Lake, it showed how the crime affected these smaller humans. But this time, instead of the escape that Lisa attempted, Tom took his anger out on someone else. Now, PACE president Teenie Cox explained the reason for creating the stadium. "Our sincere hope is that this new film, building on the success of The Lake, will encourage young people to talk about their experiences openly and without fear, so that they can be provided with the support they need." Now, these short films were creative in a subtle way. They told the stories of Lisa and Tom. The next video, however, took its creative depiction of addiction and turned it into something straight out of a gore-filled horror movie. A 2004 United Nations study found that in 2001, New Zealand ranked among the countries that had the highest numbers of users of amphetamines, or ATS. ATS is a stimulant that creates a sense of euphoria, and the study showed that 3.4% of the country's population used it recreationally. On top of that, New Zealand reported that 2.2% of the population used ecstasy, another stimulant that alters its users' mood. Seeing this, the government realized that they needed to prevent these numbers from increasing, so they released this ad in 2003, which is now known as one of the most horrifying anti-drug PSAs of all time. Titled No Brainer, the video followed a young man, who we'll call Steve, making his way to the restroom of a club. There, he locked himself inside a stall and placed a credit card and a dollar bill on top of the closed toilet seat. But instead of reaching for drugs in his pocket, he reached up to the back of his head and opened a portion of his skull, peeling it off his skull. The video then showed a close-up view of his brain, where Steve pinched off a bloody piece of flesh and placed it on the back of the toilet seat. He then went on to chop it into bits with his credit card, carefully arranging the mess into a straight line. When he was done, Steve even licked the blood from the card afterward. Steve then rolled up his dollar bill and used it to snort the bits off the toilet seat. Afterwards, he then wiped blood from his nose and licked it off his thumb. The video then closed in on his eye as his pupils dilated, showing that what he inhaled was already taking effect. The ad then warned the viewers that every day more and more people are lining up to destroy themselves. The phone number for the National Society of Alcoholism and Drug Dependency then flashed on screen, urging those struggling with drugs to ask for help. And while the intent was to save people from drug dependency, the graphic scene with the brain disgusted the audience, making the gory scene more memorable than the phone number that was supposed to help them. And apart from that, the sound effect along the high-pitched screeching noise in the background also disturbed people, with one comparing the sound effects to being at a butcher's shop. People were also disgusted disgusted at how this ad was shown between cartoons and didn't have a warning for graphic content before it aired. So young New Zealanders grew up seeing this ad, with one of them commenting on YouTube years later saying, "We were really 10 to 12 years old watching cartoons when this came on, and they wonder why our generation has opioid problems." The PSA fandom page for this video even refused to post the video due to its graphic nature, with moderators warning their users to search at your own risk. Now the effect it had on people had many commenting how this video's score looked straight out of a horror movie, and the same could be said about the next PSA ad, but this time it warned its viewers about an accident that could happen to anyone in their own home. With around 1,000 fire-related deaths per year between the 1980s and the 1990s, the UK government launched campaigns to spread awareness about fire safety, and since many of these accidents started in homes, they created the Furniture and Furnishings Fire Safety Regulations of 1988, requiring manufacturers of furniture like sofas and armchairs to do a cigarette resistance test. Their campaign to reduce fire-related deaths at home didn't stop there though. They also launched public safety videos, with the one from 1995 burning itself in the memories of its viewers. The video started with a framed photo of a mother and her children shortly before things suddenly started going wrong. Despite the giggling of a child playing in the background, the photo was suddenly lit on fire and the blaring sound of a smoke detector began. The frame then showed a scene of the mother attempting to stomp out the fire, while her son tried to help by giving her a glass of water. It then switched back to the family portrait, but this time the mother and her two children were screaming while her father's hand reached out to them from the corner of the screen. The screen however glitched and the mother suddenly disappeared while her children continued screaming. However, the daughter also disappeared just a moment later, leaving her brother trapped by himself. Now while still hearing the screams of his son, the father, whom we'll call Frank, awoke from the nightmare, but he still heard his children screaming from the other side of his bedroom door. They banged on the door as it erupted in flames as well, and as Frank looked on, he could see his memory of the day he took the photo of his wife and kids, but this image was also engulfed in flames now. Finally, the video switched to Frank, waking again from the nightmare. This time it was for real, as he found sunlight spilling from his windows, and the smoke alarm he heard turned out to be his alarm clock. The happy photo of his family was still framed on his bedside table, untouched by fire. He then shut the alarm clock off and took the frame from the table, staring at the image of his family. The narration then warned the viewers that they needed to make a plan if their smoke alarm suddenly went off, and hauntingly, she added that if they didn't, they might live to regret it. Now as the narrator said this, the video panned out to a top view of Frank's bed, and beside him, the bed was empty. His wife was gone, and this gave viewers the idea that his nightmare wasn't just a dream, it was a memory. His wife and children did die from a house fire, and he wasn't able to save them.
When your smoke alarm goes off, make sure you know what to do. Plan your escape now, or you might live to regret it.
Now apart from the scenario in this ad possibly happening to anyone in the comfort of their own home, the screams and imagery of the family in flames were horrifying to a lot of viewers. But aside from that, the reveal that it wasn't a dream after all this gave this PSA a depressing ending, with one viewer who watched it on a YouTube upload commenting, "That's one of the saddest PSAs I've ever seen." Now many governments use this type of shock value to scare the people from being irresponsible. The next PSA ad, however, truly leaned into the horror, as they showed the gruesome fate of someone using illegal drugs. In 1996, the movie Trainspotting premiered. This British black comedy film followed a group of young adults struggling through their dependency on illegal drugs. And when the Scottish audience went to the cinemas to watch this film, they ironically were first met with a PSA ad about drug use. And seeing this horrifying ad on the big screen definitely left a mark. The ad, titled "Paranoid is Somatic," featured a Polaroid photo of a young man. For this video, let's just call him Jared. Now Jared's face faded into the front and center of the video, much like how an image taken from a real Polaroid photo would slowly fade in upon print. Now Jared's eyes were wide, while his smile showed a full set of healthy teeth, though his pupils were unnaturally dilated. Club music and flashing lights implied that this photo was taken at a nightclub. Now as the video progressed, spots on Jared's face appeared, and his teeth began to yellow. In seconds, pimples and boils began to surface from his cheek, while his smile slightly dropped. His teeth were now graying green and yellow, showing signs of decay. and seconds later a crack formed on his lip before his entire mouth appeared completely dry, as if he'd been dehydrated for days. His eyes were now sunken, framed by dark circles, while the eyes themselves were beginning to redden. A voice then listed Jared's conditions, naming spots on his skin and rotting teeth. And apart from the physical changes, the voice also mentioned how Jared had depression, anxiety attacks, personality changes, and paranoia. And as the narrator listed these psychological conditions, Jared's photo changed. First his eye drooped and his mouth was now open, as if he was tired and breathing through his mouth. Next it showed him gritting his teeth as if in pain. And a split second later, the image showed him with eyes, red and tearful. The photo kept changing now, showing Jared shaking his head violently before stopping again with an expression of severe pain.
Spots, rotten teeth, depression, anxiety attacks, personality changes.
But it wasn't over. For a split second, his eyes were bulging, his nose was inflated, and his mouth was stretched into an inhuman frown. They crossed past his cheeks, and in the next frame, his face became red-orange. His eyebrows pulled down in rage, while his mouth now had long, sharp, graying teeth. The image briefly returned to Jared's decayed face, with boils, rotting teeth, and dry lips included, but suddenly he transformed into a fully demonic look, with his eyes wide and glaring in rage. His face now overall was distorted. Then all of that began to melt off the Polaroid, as the narrator warned that this could happen to its audience if they took illegal substances like speed and acid.
Personality changes. Paranoia. Take speed, ecce, or acid, and you can develop any of them.
And that was it. There were no comforting words and no phone number to call if someone needed help. No credit to which government agency was responsible for showing these horrifying images on the big screen. And cinema goers who just witnessed Jared's grotesque transformation before the movie even began were just left with those images in mind while waiting in a dark theater. Now this PSA ad was featured in cinemas across Scotland, and not just before the film Trainspotting. Thankfully it was rated 15, so it didn't show before films that were targeted to children though. Still, the video that was supposed to focus on the man's transformation haunted many. Now the idea of showing a transforming Polaroid photo wasn't without inspiration though. According to the PSA database website, the Scottish government based this video on research that claimed the target audience was not motivated by the fear of death. However, younger teens were overwhelmingly concerned that they may lose their looks if they started taking drugs. And with this in mind, they discourage people from using such drugs by showing how it will physically as well as emotionally change them. Now while this PSA targeted what teens and young adults feared, the next video showed what trauma could do to a person of a much younger age.
I was lucky my uncle didn't say anything.
Back in 2008, a particularly haunting German PSA ad played between TV shows and before movies in the theaters, but this one was different since it didn't show any graphic scenes. The video opened to a girl's bedroom where someone appeared to be listening to wind chimes from a window, and a radio played an audiobook for the fairy tale titled The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids. The girl, who we'll call Carol, was on her bed with her eyes staring blankly, but she wasn't alone. A skin-colored tentacle crawled over her legs, yet the smaller human didn't react to it as if she was used to its presence. In the next scene, she was on the swings, with only the tentacle as her companion, and despite being surrounded by others in the playground, no one seemed to notice both her and her little friend. The video then showed Carol in her high school years. She tried to listen to her lessons, but the tentacle was still there, appearing from inside her clothes. The next scene showed Carol on a date. She was happy during her picnic with her boyfriend, yet the moment he touched her knee, the tentacle appeared from behind her. It invaded her romantic moment, and she had to hide the pain she felt from her boyfriend. Now years passed again, and Carol was enjoying a meal with her friends. She laughed at someone's story about their uncle, but when the video closed up on her face, her laughter disappeared. The tentacle was there again, having haunted her for decades now. Again, she could only try to hide the horror it made her feel as it moved down her torso.
I was lucky my uncle didn't say anything.
Now another couple decades later, and Carol was now living in a retirement home. She had lived her life and now needed a wheelchair to move, and she stared blankly at a window as if her memory was fading. But despite all the years and her physical and mental well-being declining, she dropped her blanket and revealed that the tentacle was still with her, wrapped around her legs as if trapping her there. Finally, when Carol passed, the tentacle crawled away. It left her alone after becoming a constant nightmare throughout her life. The screen then turned to black before showing the message, reminding viewers how younger people who experienced horrible things may never outgrow the trauma if they couldn't get help. Now, after the shocking, grotesque and bloody scenes from the other ads we've covered so far, this video was quiet in comparison. No violence, no shocking scenes, just a woman who lived quietly with the strange and invasive tentacle that symbolized the trauma she hid and never recovered from, even on the day she died. But there was more to the video. The audiobook at the beginning narrated the part of the wolf and the 7 little kids, where the wolf pretended to be the mother of 7 young goats, otherwise known as kids. It was trying to trick the kids into believing it was a comforting parental figure that they could trust, but in reality, the wolf wanted to eat the little goats. And with the tentacle first appearing while Carol listened to this, the video implied that whoever had harmed her was someone she trusted, likely someone from the family. This was also hinted at during the scene when she was older and having dinner with friends. The story she was listening to involved her friend's uncle, and at the mention of that word, the tentacle appeared on her again. These details made it look like Carol was being intimately harmed by her uncle. The subtle storytelling of this video was effective in disturbing its viewers. As one YouTube commenter described, "I was stuck staring at this thing in blank horror for over a minute before my brain caught up with me. Fleshy, tentacle, hairy thing, crawling all over. Ew, just ew." But apart from creeping out its audience, viewers also related to the character in the video, expressing how accurately it presented how the trauma felt for them. One shared that, "I remember seeing this somewhere on the internet when I was younger. I've had a child and will never go back to being with a man because of what I've been through. This is exactly what it feels like sometimes, and what I see when I'm around men." But beyond these kinds of reactions, the PSA ad was also successful in its goal. Dunkelziffer e.V., a non-profit organization dedicated to helping smaller humans who've experienced violence, created this PSA to spread awareness and encourage donations for the victims. And after the ad was released, Dunkelziffer received an increase of 20% in donations. And apart from that, they also received 15% more calls from victims who were encouraged to seek help because of the ad. Now, this PSA managed to get their message across through subtle storytelling, though the next video blatantly depicted things that could harm younger audiences just from watching their TV screens.
Well, I've got just the thing to cheer you up.
What is it?
It's something that'll make you happy again. Look at the bubbles.
Are you sure this is okay?
It's fine. Everybody does it.
It's 2004, and late-night TV in South Africa decided to air one of the most bizarre PSAs ever filmed. It was a video of something that looked completely safe. A sunny garden, a cheerful bear, and upbeat music. It looked like a morning show for kids, but it was playing after 9 PM when the children were already asleep. Then the video progressed, and it became one of the most deliberately disturbing things ever put on television. Now, 3 years before this, on September 2nd, 2001, Cartoon Network launched a late-night programming blog called Adult Swim. This programming segment came with a warning that read, "The following programs are intended for mature audiences over the age of 18. These programs may contain intense violence, intimate situations, coarse language, and suggestive dialogue." Now, before the segment's creation, animated shows were generally believed to be targeted for kids, but of course, that wasn't the case. Adult cartoons were already around for decades, with The Simpsons being the first to make it into mainstream media back in 1989. Now, this type of content wasn't appropriate for children, so Adult Swim became one of the platforms for creators wanting to tell mature stories in an animated format. But since they were still animated and included colorful characters, some worried that kids would mistake these shows for their usual Saturday morning cartoons. And to prevent this, South Africa's Film and Publication Board released the Biggie Bear PSA ad in 2004 to warn parents how some brightly colored shows might be harmful to their children, and they depicted samples of what to watch out for in the most blatant and disturbing way. As the campaign title suggested, the ads featured a character named Biggie Bear, who was played by an actor wearing a bear suit. In the first video titled Biggie Bear Says Hello, we see our main character greeting his audience, which he called kids. The setting was similar to a peaceful garden, something that could fit into a wholesome family show like Sesame Street. And given that it was a beautiful day, Biggie Bear suggested doing something, but before he could say more, he got interrupted by the appearance of another character named Mr. Rabbit.
Hello, kids! What a beautiful day! Perhaps today.
Hello, Biggie Bear!
Still using a jolly tone, Biggie Bear reminded Mr. Rabbit that he asked him not to join him in the show. Then he slapped away the ball that the bunny was holding. However, Mr. Rabbit ignored him and tried to interact with the audience.
What do you want, Mr. Rabbit?
I just popped around to say hello on this beautiful day.
I told you not to come here anymore. This is my show!
Hello, kids. How are you all doing?
This prompted Biggie Bear to hit him across the head before pushing him to the ground and beating him up for interrupting his show. Now Mr. Rabbit desperately apologized, while the video showed that he'd gotten a bloody nose from the attack.
What's the matter, Biggie?
Shut up! You like that?
I'm sorry!
But Biggie Bear wasn't done. Suddenly he pulled out a gun and placed it into Mr. Rabbit's mouth, and as the rabbit started choking and crying, the screen went dark and a message then appeared asking parents, "What is your children learning from television?" And while all of this was going on, the sounds of Biggie Bear yelling at Mr. Rabbit could be heard before he ultimately pulled the trigger. Now Biggie Bear Says Hello was already shocking, with its use of visuals that were often reserved for children's television before switching the narrative into something violent. But it was only the first of the Biggie Bear PSAs, and while the first ad had the screen turn black before Biggie Bear pulled the trigger, the second showed him committing the act that no child should copy. Titled Biggie Bear's Surprise, the second ad opened with the same garden, a greeting from the main character. But this time Biggie Bear's guest was Mr. Spotty, a man in a Dalmatian costume who shuffled into frame looking unhappy. He couldn't explain why he felt so sad. He just sat on the ground dejected, and Biggie Bear, with concern in his voice, told him he had something that would fix the situation.
Hello, kids! What a beautiful day! Look, the sun is out. Oh, yes, Mr. Spotty.
Hi, Mr. Spotty. Hello.
What's the matter?
I don't know. I'm just sad.
But it's such a beautiful day. Well, I've got just the thing to cheer you up.
He produced a spoon and a lighter, using them to cook substances. And with complete cheerful normality, he promised Mr. Spotty that it would make him happy again, even distracting him with the bubbles that the substance was making. And even though Mr. Spotty looked unsure about this, Biggie Bear injected the substance into his arm. Now Mr. Spotty immediately began moaning, thumping back against a haystack. And Biggie Bear turned to the camera and said,
See, kids? It's easy to be happy again.
He then skipped away, leaving Mr. Spotty on the ground before the same question from the first video appeared on the screen.
Bye!
Now the choice to actually show these colorful characters using drugs was made to shock adults and make them of course question what they were allowing kids to see on their screens. Now the final installment censored the act itself, but it was still too extreme to be officially uploaded online, though some viewers still recorded it and uploaded it on YouTube for the world to see. The third video, Biggie Bear Meets a Friend, opened with Biggie Bear taking a walk through the garden. He then met Miss Pussycat, a woman in a cat costume carrying flowers. Both characters greeted each other warmly at first, the way every good children's show character would. But seconds later, Biggie Bear began touching her inappropriately, and despite her protests, he pushed her down onto the haystack and attacked her intimately. The screen soon faded to black, but the sounds of the attack remained as the PSA's question appeared again. Now this question was pointed at the parents, as the South African's Film and Publication Board placed the responsibility on them to keep their children safe from such content. Of course, the ad campaigns were only one step in their fight to regulate children's shows. As the group explains on their site, the FPB aims to balance freedom of expression with the need to protect consumers, especially children, from potentially harmful or inappropriate media content. And while the Film and Publication Board wanted to save children's minds from harmful shows, the next PSA hoped to prevent young victims from deadly crimes happening in the streets. In 2006, a PSA aired on British television that opened like any other Sunday afternoon in South London, but despite it only airing after 9 PM, it was pulled from television entirely for its horrifying content. The video began with the mother, who we'll call Jane, moving around the table serving lunch to her two young sons, Chris and William, let's just call them that, and her older son, a young man in his late teens, whom I'll name Brian for this video. They arrived with his friends, greeting his mother with a kiss on the cheek. Brian's friends also greeted the family as they joined them around the table.
Okay.
You're right, Mum.
Hi, you alright?
What's
up?
Hello.
Hi.
Oh man, where's my fish fingers?
Brian then confirmed with his mother if he had to pick up his brothers from school the next day. Jane said yes, but his friends thought it wasn't a good idea.
No. Coming to pick up the kids from school tomorrow.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yo, blood, that rave yesterday was big, I like.
The group of teens began talking about a friend named Anton, who was involved in a recent gang shootout, and despite the violence they were discussing over the table, just across from two grade school boys, the teens laughed and joked about the event, even mocking Anton for missing his shot.
Seriously,
I bet you any money Anton flopped the show.
He always flops, man. He always does that, innit?
They then casually revealed that they were planning a retaliation against the rival gang, even mentioning that Anton shouldn't join since he might mess up again. Now as they talked about plotting a gunfight, the younger brothers kept quiet. Meanwhile, Jane continued serving lunch and putting away her cooking utensils. Brian then commented about how having younger siblings to protect allowed him to stay indoors, while the beef stays outside. But as he said this, Jane walked to a shelf near the door and reached up.
What the occasion, birthday, christenings, my man always finds a way.
I'll tell you something though, it was a good thing you man never come because he was a big...
And without speaking, she pulled out a gun from the shelf, aimed it at William, and pulled the trigger. Blood sprayed over the table, while everyone backed away in horror. Chris whimpered, while the teens who'd been talking about shooting up their rivals shook, before Brian threw up, nauseated by the scene before him.
About last night.
See, that's why I like having younger brothers and sisters. I stay indoors while the beef stays outside.
Jane, who had just pulled the trigger on her innocent son, dropped the weapon and sank back against the wall, and then the screen went black. A message appeared directed to the viewer saying, "If you keep quiet about gun crime, it's like pulling the trigger yourself." Now while this message filled the screen, the cries of the family could still be heard, highlighting the tragedy that guns could lead to. Now this PSA video was a response to the rising cases of street gang fights in South London. In 2005, Southwark Borough specifically had become one of the most dangerous places in the country to be young, as even 12-year-olds were found to be carrying weapons. The youth workers who were trying to stop gun violence found that even girls armed themselves with weapons and called them fashion accessories. And with weapons present in settings like playgrounds, a simple argument could lead to deadly situations. Now the youth getting their hands on firearms contributed to the increase in gun violence in the area, with Southwark ranking as the second district in London with the most reported gun violence between 2005 and 2006, recording 34 confirmed shootings. Now Uwano Seshmi, who ran the From Boyhood to Manhood Foundation, an organization that helped boys escape gangs and gun culture, believed that the gang leaders are grooming young people to do the dirty work because they don't want to do the killing themselves. It's like creating child soldiers. The violence and the gangster stuff is very attractive to young boys who are excluded from school, disenchanted, and don't feel they belong. Meanwhile, a 2006 government study looked at 80 young men who'd been convicted of violent firearms offenses to find a pattern that might help prevent more teens and kids from getting involved. And of those 80 young men in their study, 59 came from disrupted family backgrounds. 35 of them had grown up in a single-parent homes with no positive male figure present. And this gave the impression that the gun crime wasn't just happening on the street corners. It was being indirectly encouraged due to unstable situations within their homes. And this was the specific problem the PSA ad, titled Sunday Lunch, was built to crack open. Now before the ad even aired, Southwark Council partnered with Crime Stoppers, the UK's anonymous crime reporting charity. Now Crime Stoppers runs a 24-hour anonymous phone line, promising witnesses that their name is never recorded and their identity won't be traced. Now the anonymity was the point, as there are crimes committed or left unsolved because witnesses are too scared to report what they knew. One example of this was the unsolved murder of police constable Keith Blakelaw during the 1985 London riots. His case was actually the inspiration for Crime Stoppers, as police at the time believed that his killer would have been behind bars if witnesses weren't afraid to come out. Now combining the study that many of the young people involved in gun violence came from broken homes and the belief that crimes could be solved or even prevented if witnesses weren't afraid to speak up made the Sunday Lunch PSA specifically centered around this message. The symbolism of the mother raising the gun portrayed how her not speaking against her oldest son's plans could lead to her most innocent and youngest child getting caught in the fire. And while Sunday Lunch highlighted the fear and indirect responsibility of a witness, this next PSA took its viewers into the mind of a victim of a global crime that is still destroying thousands of lives today.
Elena trusted everyone. Maria doesn't trust anyone.
Back in 2007, Anita Roddick, a known human rights activist and founder of the cosmetic brand The Body Shop, was working on a program to address a nightmare that millions of people lived through. Unfortunately, on September 10, 2007 though, she suddenly passed away due to a stroke. Now her memorial was held on November 7, 2007, and hundreds of people who supported her joined together to celebrate her life and show their support to the campaigns she left behind. But apart from her supporters, a fellow activist, Helen Bamber, honored her legacy by creating a PSA that addressed the issue that Anita was was working to stop before she passed away. And Helen and her foundation released that video on the same day of Anita's memorial. To this day, this video remains one of the most difficult PSA ads to watch. The video featured a familiar face. It was Emma Thompson, a well-known Hollywood actress who often appeared in romance movies like Much Ado About Nothing and fantasy films like Harry Potter and Nanny McPhee. This role, however, was nothing like the ones she played before. She was shown lying on her back on a dirty sheet. A man's back flashed on screen before she said the first lines.
Elena didn't think anyone would hurt her.
The video then cut to several unnerving scenes, like a hand pushing down her face and grabbing her hair before the woman went limp. She then continued,
Elena trusted everyone.
But then another shot of the actress appeared. She looked dejected and exhausted as she said,
Maria doesn't trust anyone.
The video went on to compare these two characters, Elena and Maria. Elena wanted to learn English, but Maria got beaten when she said no. Elena worked to support her family, but Maria worked for nothing. Elena wanted to be a nurse to help people, but Maria serviced up to 40 men a day. Now all these lines were delivered while the video showed split-second shots of someone attacking the woman on screen. And given the story of Maria servicing up to 40 men a day, what was really happening to her became much clearer to the audience. She then talked about Elena crying when her father was angry with her, but Maria didn't feel anything anymore. And as she delivered the last line, two hands were grabbing her at her shoulder and face, not caring if this was actually hurting her, and the movements of her body were clearly implying that she was being intimate with this person without her permission. Then the viewers were told that Elena's family believed that she was dead, which followed by several quick shots of what was happening, along with a desperate cry for help. The actress then said,
I was Elena. I am Maria.
She begged for help, telling the audience that she was still there, and during this cry for help, she was being attacked, but she couldn't do anything about it anymore. Finally, Elena rolled over to her stomach, as if in defeat. And the Foundation's message appeared on the screen, telling people that women who were trafficked lost more than their names, which was followed by the message, trafficking is torture. Now this PSA's message left a lasting impression on its audience. Its copy on YouTube had plenty of horrified reactions, with one commenter saying, yes, it's shocking, brutal, chilling, all those words, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be. How else can we get the message across to the masses that this is still happening? The only thing I've found almost as disgusting as this trait in human beings is the absolute apathy of politicians, the mainstream media, and the general public. You should be as disturbed by that. Now this was true, as the nightmarish split-second scenes of Maria's attack, combined with her backstory as the ordinary and hopeful Elena, stressed that trafficking could happen to anyone. In the early 2000s, the United Kingdom had seen a disturbing increase of human trafficking in their country, and in 2007 alone, the year when this PSA was released, the government identified 330 cases of trafficking of smaller humans. And of course, these were only the cases that were discovered. The truth is that there are much more cases that haven't been uncovered to this day, and this is why charity organizations like the Helen Bamber Foundation were founded. Helen, who also lived most of her life as a human activist, founded the groups to support victims of trafficking, and even after her death, Anita's company, The Body Shop, continued to fight to stop these cases from happening. Their campaign was officially launched in 2009 and was successful in pushing government leaders worldwide to create legislations dedicated to protecting potential victims of trafficking. And this PSA's imagery and acting was effective in showing people the horrors of victims of trafficking. The next one didn't need to show its audience the terrifying events though, as everyone knew from the moment they heard the cries of a smaller person. Between the late 1990s and early 2000s, a myth prevailed in South Africa. A study in 1999 found that 32% of the people they interviewed believed in this myth, and given the context of what it was, the number was very alarming, because this belief caused a horrifying crime to increase. Now, one attempt to prevent this crime was a PSA video released in 2003. During evenings, South African TV screens were filled with a child's drawing of a group of chicks hatching from their eggs. Now, this drawing was revealed to be taped to the wall of a simple kitchen. Now, the artist's voice could be heard singing through a baby monitor sitting on the counter. Now the viewers couldn't see her, but it sounded like she was playing with her dolls and singing to herself. Her voice was light and completely untroubled. And then the door to her room opened. She greeted her father, who just arrived. However, instead of a warm family moment, things escalated to something that should never happen to anyone. The father kept his voice low, but it was enough for the monitor to pick up what he said. He whispered for his daughter to come closer, and the light in her voice disappeared instantly. She began saying no, in a tone that suggested that she was beginning to cry, hinting that he wanted to do something that she refused to, but she'd already experienced it before. The camera then began to move slowly away from the monitor and toward her mother. She'd been ironing clothes in the kitchen while keeping the baby monitor on to ensure that her daughter was safe, but now she placed the iron down as she heard what was happening in the other room, and she went completely still. The man's voice repeated the word quiet, while the daughter continued saying no, and what came afterwards was never shown, because it didn't need to be. The sounds from the monitor and the expression of the mother's face said it all. The mother began to cry, but she controlled it. She kept herself from screaming out as she heard what her husband was doing. No, she didn't run to stop it. She didn't call for help. She just listened and cried, like she had no power to intervene. The camera then pulled back, watching the mother from outside the house as a narrator asked,
"If you don't stop him from here, who will?"
The video ended with the logo for Women and Men Against Abuse, or the WMACA, while the narrator encouraged people to
find your strength.
Now this ad left a mark in every viewer. It was even uploaded to YouTube in 2020 by The Unusual Archive, who documented strange and disturbing PSAs online. And despite having uploaded over 1,000 videos, The Unusual Archive described this one as arguably the scariest ad ever made. Now the original broadcast of this ad was by the WMACA, who was responding to the country's extreme increase in criminal acts done to smaller humans. In 1998, 37,500 cases of these were reported to the police in South Africa, and by 2000, that number had jumped to 67,000 in a single year. And to make things worse, welfare groups who worked with known victims believed the real figure could be up to 10 times higher, because most cases were never reported at all. A significant part of what was driving the increase in cases was because of the myth I mentioned earlier. Now this myth spread due to the country's AIDS epidemic, and the belief was that having intimate contact with someone inexperienced would cure them of this disease. And with an estimate of 32% of the population believing this myth to be true, perpetrators attempted to cure themselves by targeting people they knew, and those victims were often their own relatives. And adding to this was the fact that since some of these offenders used their AIDS infection as their excuse, the act also exposed the victim to the same disease, infecting them with something that had no cure. And this is why the PSA ad titled Baby Monitor depicted the crime happening inside what looked like a normal family home, mirroring what was happening in the country during that time. It aired on South African television in 2003, reportedly restricted to late night hours giving its content, and viewer reactions were consistent and striking, with some saying, "I feel physically sick to my stomach. It's truly heart-wrenching how some people actually go through stuff like this in real life too." And this PSA stays in the back of my head because of how disturbing and sadly true this is about SA victims. The no part echoes in my mind, and the cries just make my heart stop and my whole body turn into goosebumps.